Welcome back to the Health Edition of Talk TV. I'm Dr. Carl Capicel, and I'm here with Dr. Pierre Major from the Hamilton Regional Cancer Center, John Kalachi, a colorectal cancer survivor, and we're joined on the phone by Barry Stein, who's the president of the Colorectal Cancer Association of Canada. We're going to go right back to the phone right now, actually, and we're going to speak to Mike in Toronto. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hi, what's your question today?
I just have a question. I was diagnosed with diverticulosis, and I'm very young for it, they said. I'm only like 38.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if I'm at a high risk for colon cancer.
Okay, so Mike has diverticular disease. First of all,
doesn't place him at higher risk for colon cancer, but he might experience bleeding and with diverticulosis. And again, if there's bleeding, you can't necessarily say that it's because of the diverticulosis. It would have to be evaluated and make sure they're not missing a diagnosis of cancer. So it doesn't predispose him to cancer, but it doesn't also say that any bleeding should be neglected. And you have to remain aware and alert.
Diverticular disease, what is it?
Well, diverticular disease are little outpouchings of the lining of the bowel. It's like, and they tend to get inflamed, sometimes infected or bleed.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, how did it come to your attention or your doctor's attention?
Well, I had bleeding, rectal bleeding for a while, and I ended up just going for a checkup. I had a Baramenema,
yeah.
And then they said I had diverticulosis.
Okay.
My mother passed away with ovarian cancer.
Perhaps I could run through some of the risk factors.
Absolutely.
Some of the risk factors are being, of course, over the age of 50, although, as you know from John and in my own case, we were younger, but the numbers spike greatly at 50 years and over. Having a previous history of colorectal polyps, so polyps can be found to be non-cancerous, of course, and removed, but having a history of them is an indication that there is a higher risk. Having inflammatory bowel disease, such as ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, these are also increase your risk of having a colorectal cancer.
Right.
Here's some other interesting ones. Having a poor diet, some, for example, with very high red meat consumption and low in fiber, fruits and vegetables. So we know now if we have lots of fruits and vegetables, that's a good thing as well, but we want to stay away from our red meats, at least large quantities of it.
Okay.
Having a family history of colorectal cancer is certainly a predictive factor or something that would tend to increase your risk.
Right.
Having a personal history, as this caller said, of either ovarian or endometrial or breast cancer, this is something that can increase your risk factor. And here's a really interesting one: little or no exercise. And to the contrary, certain studies have been published recently which indicate that by increasing your exercise, you can actually not only prevent colorectal cancer in the first place, but if you've had it, it helps to prevent it from coming back.
Okay. Dr. Pierre, the issue of diet. Now, we do know, of course, that a high-fiber diet with lots of fruits and veggies is good. What about the red meat? Because my understanding is it's a little controversial.
Well, I think that certainly if you cook red meat on a barbecue, you actually are producing carcinogens. The process of cooking and burning.
Yep.
So there certainly are carcinogens that you're producing in the red meat, and it is associated with a higher risk of colon cancer. I think that's pretty solid evidence now that's established.
But and red meat by itself without the char, without the black stuff on it. Okay.
And it may not be directly the red meat, but it's associated with higher fat intake and other lifestyle habits. So But that association between the consumption, the amount of red meat you eat, and higher risk of colorectal cancer is pretty well established.
Okay, and John, have you, since you've had your surgery, you're under treatment for colorectal cancer, have you changed your diet?
Not really. I still consume basically what I had prior to becoming sick. I like to think, I've cut out some of the fat, but I'll still have steak on the barbecue, and I'll still have chicken and fish and everything else. So I really haven't dramatically changed the diet.
Okay, fair enough. Have you increased your fruits and veggies at all?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah. So Barry's point needs to be emphasized that exercise, and now the body of evidence is really accumulating that it can improve your outcome. If you've had cancer, you had colorectal cancer, and you exercise, it markedly improves your outcome. maybe achieving some as good results as we can do with chemotherapy, adjuvant chemotherapy, so-called, to help what the surgeon couldn't get at his surgery. So it's a very important point, exercise, something people can do for themselves within their own area of influence, and to improve their outcome from colon cancer.
Absolutely. Well, I guess exercise is something that has no downside, as long as you do as much as you can tolerate safely. You know, heart disease, now we're talking about cancer. There's so many things that eating well and exercising can do for you. It's all about lifestyle, right?
Absolutely.
There are a few other things which are of interest. Some of them are under study, and some of them seem to be pretty conclusive. For example, of course, maintaining a healthy body weight.
Right.
We found that people with a high abdominal circumference, let's say, tend to be more prone to getting colorectal cancer. The intake of vitamin D, and that could be by getting more sunshine, also seems to be preventative as well. And some were saying even calcium or the increase of selenium might as well. And those are both under study, as is folic acid. A couple of the other things that you might think about, and this doesn't mean go rush out and start taking anti-inflammatories, but we have found that anti-inflammatory agents will help to reduce the development of polyps or cancers. And of course, we have to be careful with that kind of advice. Taking aspirin, for example, is another example of it, and these are things that people can discuss with their doctors.
So,
and one last thing, for women, taking hormone treatments, it's been shown, birth control pills and so forth, or hormone replacement therapy, is associated with a lower risk. So that's kind of an interesting finding as well.
But as you mentioned, a lot of these things are still under study, so it's not to say you should rush out and start doing all of these things.
These are things to discuss with your physician.
Right. Okay, well, it's time for our final break. More of your calls still ahead, so stay with us.